Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it very much. First, 3 or 4 comments that you can comment on later if you'd like to, and then a question. First of all, for the benefit of Mr. Edwards, my good friend, and for Mr. Orszag, Paul Ryan isn't on this committee. If you would like to comment on that, comment on his plan, I suggest you do it when he can respond to it, because I think he probably has a little different take than either you or Mr. Edwards have on his plan. Secondly, the Fiscal Commission. I agree with you. I think the President was right to do that. Many of us have been suggesting this for a long time, and I think everything ought to be on the table. And it's going to be ugly. Decisions are going to be ugly. We all know that. If I think they're in the best interest of the country, I'll vote for it. If I think they aren't, I'll vote against it. And that's the way it ought to be. Thirdly, when we talk about unemployment and ERA funding, while we talk about it creating jobs, you know, I'm not one of those that says it hasn't created a job. Obviously, it's created some jobs. 300 in one company in my district doing cleanup. We are now planning for next year when they lay off those 300 people. That's something you're going to have to deal with also, because there's going to be, it's kind of like cash for clunkers. It moved the purchase of automobiles up and then depressed it in future times. So it is something that we're going to have to deal with when that unemployment hits in the coming year. Fourth, I have heard, surprisingly, I guess, financial debt, when you came into office, financial deficits, opportunity deficits, job deficits, education deficits, investment deficits, and a new one, foreign relations deficit. The only one I haven't heard is the reality deficit that seems to have been created from all of these. If there are any other deficits that you faced when you came in, could you please send me a list of all those? I'd like to hear about them. Now the question. The one thing I heard when I was home over the last couple of weeks, everywhere I went, at every banquet we had, was, I wish you at the federal level were making the same tough decisions every state legislator is making. And I heard that from state legislators. And I tell you, I've been through some of the decisions that they've had to make back in 1984 and 85 when I was in the state legislature. They've made tough, tough decisions. Is the President going to plan or submit a supplemental to bail out states? And if so, why should those states that have been fiscally responsible bail out those that have not made the tough decisions? And we all know that there are some that have not made the tough decisions that others have made. And so why should my taxpayers or Indiana's taxpayers bail out, and I won't mention the states that have been irresponsible?
Congressman, maybe I just could begin. I think you're right to say, just to go back to one of your initial points, which is that you need to think about the Recovery Act as a bridge to recovery and private spending, private investment. And I think if you look carefully at what's happening across the country today, you can see encouraging signs of that happening, because again, you just look at what's happening to businesses. You are seeing private investment expand again, exports start to grow, and that's encouraging that, you know, the economy is going to be able to grow coming out of this, even as we do the necessary thing, which is wind down these emergency things we had to do in the face of the worst recession in a long time. And you're absolutely right. Of course, we have to make tough choices, and I think the American families, not just municipal governments, are making that choice all the time. And what the President's budget does is lay out what are dramatically consequential changes in resources and commitments over the next 4 years that would bring our deficits down very, very sharply over that period of time. And Congress is going to have to choose again what mix of those policies it's going to embrace. But it's very important everybody accept the basic reality we live with, which is that we have to get those deficits down very sharply over that period of time. So you're right to emphasize it, but I think in the near term, this year, given the damage of the recession we're still living with, there's a very good fiscal case, very good economic case for giving additional support to state and local governments so they don't have to cut critical services deeply at a time when the economy is vulnerable and so many people are still suffering. We need to do that in a careful way, in a fiscally responsible way. It has to make sure it's temporary so we can unwind those kind of things. But I think there's a very good economic case, very good fiscal case now for additional targeted support for states and local governments as they make difficult choices. We're not going to relieve them of all those choices. They're going to still have to make very tough choices on priorities, but we want to make sure they're not having to cut deeply into critical services at a time when, again, in so many parts of the country, unemployment is alarmingly high, and there's still so much trauma and damage as in the aftershock of the recession.
Do we have any time?
20 seconds.
One thing I would like to address is what we're doing with fixed cost. One thing we've complimented the administration on in past years is that they have fully paid in Forest Service in the Interior. This year, Interior is going to have to accept $109 billion or $1 million in fixed cost. How are they going to do that?
Well, first, let me just say, with regard to, since you raised fire in particular, that aggregate resources, not just in Interior, but in the Agriculture Department and elsewhere for addressing wildfires is up 5%. Look, you talked about hard choices. At OMB, we face a flat nominal budget despite the fact that the vast majority, something like 80+% of our budget is personnel, and there's normal upward pressure because of not only wages but health benefits, and we have to make hard choices. The Interior Department is no different, and going down the list of other departments that I did earlier where the secretaries have agreed to even nominal reductions, they have plans to do so. I mean, in other words, they have specified budget plans to do so, and we could follow up with Secretary Salazar in particular if you're interested, but that's exactly what's involved in getting more efficiency out of the federal government.